The title is Adapting to the Effects of Climate Change. Adapt means change to deal with a new situation. Climate change means long-term changes in Earth's weather and temperature. So the title is saying how people are changing to deal with the effects of climate change. There are three question types here: matching information, gap fill, and matching features. We'll start with question 18 and leave questions 14 to 17 until the end. The reason is that questions 14 to 17 require us to find information across the passage. They become much easier when we are already familiar with the passage. So we start with gap fill questions. The answers to these questions appear in the same order as the information in the passage. Here's question 18. Pause and try to find the answer. Let's check. The question mentions Stormwater Management Program. This is a plan or system to manage rainwater during storms. The question is asking us to find something that was installed as part of this program, and this thing works well or is efficient. So we need to find Miami Beach and stormwater management program in the passage. Then we need to see what was installed, and some mention that it works efficiently. These are mentioned in paragraph B. Before the program is mentioned, the passage says, the roads have been raised. Later we get more information about the same program. The road adaptations mentioned here refer to raising the level of the roads. Then the passage says, the city has set up new pumps. Pumps are machines that move water. These pumps can remove up to 75,000 liters of water per minute. Set up means install. The passage does not use the word efficient or any of its synonyms, but it tells us that the pumps can remove very large amount of water every minute. This shows that the pumps work efficiently. So the thing that was installed is pumps. The answer to question 18 is pumps. Here are the meanings of each sentence of paragraph B. Pause if you'd like to go through them in detail. Here's question 19. Pause and try to find the answer. Let's check. The question mentions mangroves, which are a type of plant. This is a picture of mangroves. It also mentions a project in Indonesia. This project was trying to help mangroves grow successfully. The question says that in the first stage of this project, something was built. So what was built? We found the previous answer in paragraph B. Paragraph C mentions both Indonesia and mangroves. This is a slightly difficult question. If you try to understand every detail in the paragraph, it may take too much time. Notice this colon. A colon is often followed by an explanation or a list. Here, after the colon, the passage explains what mangroves are. We can quickly see that they are trees and shrubs, so we understand that they are plants. The rest of that explanation is not important to this question. The next sentence starts with Susanna Toll and her organization. That information is also not important for finding the answer. So we focus on the main idea. The passage says that many attempts were made to restore mangroves. Attempts means tries or efforts. Restore means to bring back. However, most of these projects failed. Then we reach the sentence, so Wetlands International started out with a different approach. This is the part that helps us find the answer. A different approach here means a different method or project. In this paragraph, project, approach, and program all refer to the same idea. The passage then says they started by building semi-permeable dams. Semi-permeable means some water can pass through. This is a picture to give you some idea of what semi-permeable dams may look like. We need to find out what was constructed in the first stage of the project. They started out by building the dams means in the first stage of the project, dams were built. So the answer could be semi-permeable dams or dams. The instruction in the questions is one word only. So the answer cannot be semi-permeable dams. The answer to question 19 is dams. Here are the meanings of the first part of paragraph C, and here are the meanings of the second part. Pause the video if you'd like to go through them in more detail. Here's question 20. Pause and try to find the answer. Let's check. As a response to means that one thing happened and because of that something else was done. The question says floodwaters were rising in the Mekong Delta. Because of this, a non-profit organization started building houses. A non-profit organization works for a public purpose rather than to make money. The question is asking, what can these houses do? So we need to find rising floodwaters, the Mekong Delta, a non-profit organization, and the houses it is building. Then we need to find what is special about these houses. We found the previous answer in paragraph C. The Mekong Delta is mentioned in paragraph D. Just like in question 19, the answer is spread across more than one sentence. The passage first says, the floodwaters rose. Then it says, 4 small houses rose with them. So the houses move up when the water level rises. After that, we get a sentence about traditional homes. Notice that the passage is talking about 2 different types of houses. The traditional houses and the houses that were built by the organization. So the first sentence says, 4 houses rose with the floodwaters. These 4 houses are actually the new type of houses. Then traditional houses are mentioned, which are on stilts or long poles. Then it says, these ones had been built to float. These ones refers to the 4 houses that rose, not the traditional houses. These new houses had been built in a way that they could rise up and float. Then it says the modifications or the changes were made by a non-profit organization. The changes are that the houses could float or they could rise with the floodwaters. These houses are also called amphibious houses. Amphibious means able to function both on land and on water. You may have heard this word in science when talking about animals such as frog, which can live both on land and in water. Here is a picture to give you an idea of what the traditional houses with stilts look like and what the new type of houses look like. We have 3 words to describe the new houses. They rose, they could float, and they are amphibious. Now we need to figure out which of these words fits into the blank. The question says houses that can. After the word can, we need a verb. Float is a verb. Rose is also a verb, but it is the wrong form of the verb, so it doesn't fit into this sentence. Amphibious is an adjective. We can say amphibious houses or houses that are amphibious, but we cannot say houses that can amphibious. It sounds wrong. So the answer to question 20 is float. The answer comes from the beginning of paragraph D. Here are the meanings of the sentences from that part of the paragraph. Pause if you'd like to go through them in detail. Here's question 21. Pause and try to find the answer. Let's check. The question is a long sentence. Let's break it into parts. Sea levels in Bangladesh are rising. Because of this, something has become necessary. Various means different kinds of. Introduce means bring in or start using something new. So, sea levels in Bangladesh are rising. Different kinds of something has been introduced. This something is suitable for areas where salt content is high. In other words, we are looking for something that can survive in salty conditions. A lot of words from the question are mentioned in paragraph E. At the beginning of the paragraph, it is mentioned that sea levels are rising. Because of this, the salt content in soil and water is increasing. Salinity means the amount of salt in soil or water. After that, it says that there is a project helping communities adapt to salt affected soils. That is, the project is helping people adjust to land with a high salt content. Then it mentions a company that is working with farmers to start cultivating naturally salt tolerant crops. Cultivating means growing. Salt tolerant crops are crops that can grow well in salty soil. After that, different varieties of these crops are mentioned, such as carrot, potato, and beetroot. And again, it mentions that these crops were better suited to salty soil or areas of high salt content. The answer is not carrot, potato, cabbage, or any other example. We need the general word that includes all of them. So the answer to question 21 is crops. Here are the meanings of the first part of paragraph E, and here are the meanings of the second part. Pause here if you want to understand them in detail. Here's question 22. Pause here and try to find the answer. Let's check. The question is about a project in Los Angeles or LA. The project has increased the number of something on the city's streets. So we are looking for something that has become more common in LA's streets because of this project. We found the answer to the previous question in paragraph E. LA is mentioned in paragraph F. So that's where we look for the answer. A project or a program from LA is mentioned, Cool Streets LA program. The passage says that this included the planting of trees and the installation of a cool pavement system. The cool pavement system helps reduce temperatures, but the question is asking about the number of something that has increased. When trees are planted, the number of trees increases. Because this is a street project, these trees are being added along the city streets. So the answer to question 22 is trees. Here are the meanings of each sentence from the first part of paragraph F, where we found the answer. Pause here if you want to understand it in detail. Here are the answers to all the gap fill questions and their locations in the passage. And this is the step-by-step method we followed to find these answers. Notice that all the answers appear in the same order as the information in the passage. It's important to understand the questions properly before looking for the answers. We need to know exactly what information is missing. This becomes especially important when the question sentence is long, as we saw in questions 20 and 21. Another thing to remember is that the information in the question may not appear in a single sentence in the passage. Very often, one part of the question comes from one sentence and another part comes from the next sentence. We saw this in questions 18 and 20, where we had to connect information from multiple sentences before we could identify the answer. In this passage, locating the correct paragraph was relatively easy. All the questions contain useful location keywords such as place names and capitalized words. These helped us quickly find the relevant part of the passage. However, finding the correct paragraph does not always mean finding the answer immediately. Questions 19 and 20 were good examples of this. Even after locating the correct paragraph, we still had to connect information from different parts of the paragraph and understand how the ideas were linked together. So, for gap fill questions, finding the location is only the first step. Understanding the meaning and following the logic of the paragraph is equally important. Now we start with the next set of questions, the matching features questions. In this question type, we are given some statements and a list of people. We need to match each statement to the correct person. So basically, we need to find who said what. Sometimes the instruction at the top says that you may use a letter more than once. That means the same person may be the answer to more than one question. That instruction is not given here. First, we read and understand each question. The meanings are on your screen, and we'll go through them as we attempt each question. Next, we look at the names in the list and see where they appear in the passage. This passage is quite easy because each person is mentioned in only one paragraph. For example, Yanira Pineda is mentioned in paragraph B and Susanna Toll is mentioned in paragraph C. Another thing that helps in this question type is focusing on where the people actually speak or express their views. Those parts are usually the most useful for finding the answer. For example, in paragraph C, the highlighted parts are the things that Susanna Toll says. We may need to read a little before or after for context, but our main focus should be on her statements. On your screen, each person's statements are shown in a different color. Notice that this text is not too much. We don't have to go through the whole passage to look for these answers. Question 23. Essential means very important. Adopt means accept something and start using it. From the gap fill questions, we already know that the passage is about different projects, programs, and methods that can help people deal with effects of climate change. So the question is saying that it is very important to use plans or strategies that involve and help local people. So we scan what these people have said and look for any mention of local residents or similar ideas. We find possible matches in paragraphs C and E. Paragraph E mentions a project that is helping communities adapt. Communities are the residents of the region. Adapt is not the same as adopt. Adopt means to accept something. Adapt means to adjust to something. For example, a government may adopt a new policy, but people may need to adapt to that. This word adapt is here to confuse you. Then it mentions a project in which they work with the local farmers. So, why is the answer not from here? Because it says they are working with some local people and it gave good results. But this person has not said that it is important to work with them. This is confirmed by paragraph C. Project, program, approach, and strategy are synonyms here. Many strategies or projects are mentioned in this paragraph. Some fail, some have a little success. But for us, the important part is the last sentence. It says it's critical or essential that we transition towards or move towards or adopt approaches or strategies that engage and benefit or involve and help communities and local decision makers or residents of the region. So, paragraph E indirectly mentions some things from the question. But in paragraph C, we can see that everything from the question is mentioned. This part is said by Susanna Toll. So the answer to question 23 is B. Here are the meanings of each sentence from the second part of paragraph C, where we found the answer. Pause here if you want to understand it in detail. Question 24. Interventions are things that people do when there is a problem and they want to solve or improve it. For example, if a couple is having serious problems, family members may intervene and try to help. In this passage, the problem is climate change. So, interventions are the actions, projects, or methods used to deal with climate change or its effects. So, in this question, interventions simply means things that are done to solve the problem of climate change. Vital means very important. In question 23, we saw the word essential. Vital is a synonym of essential. Survival means to stay alive. Location means a particular place. So the question is saying that in some place, reducing heat is extremely important for people to continue living there. So when we scan what these people have said, we are looking for two main ideas: a particular place and a mention of heat, temperature, cooling, or something similar. The passage mentions many different places. Almost every paragraph talks about a different country or location. But when we look at the statements connected to these people, paragraph F immediately stands out because it talks about cooling streets and reducing temperature. We have actually seen paragraph F before while doing the gap fill questions. You may already remember that this paragraph is about reducing heat in Los Angeles. Now look at what Greg Spotts says. He says that urban cooling, which means cooling cities is literally a matter of life and death. A matter of life and death means something that is extremely important or vital for survival. LA is the location. Urban cooling and the projects mentioned in this paragraph are the interventions that reduce heat. So, all three ideas mentioned in question 24 are clearly mentioned in paragraph F. This statement is made by Greg Spots. So, the answer to question 24 is E. Here are the meanings of each sentence from the first part of paragraph F, and here are the meanings from the second part. Pause here if you want to understand them in detail. Question 25. Water levels are rising and there is some impact or there are some things happening because of it. A decade is a period of 10 years. So future decades means future 10-year periods, such as the next 10, 20 or 30 years. The question is about the future. More work will need to be done means some work is already being done or has already been done and more work will be needed later. So we are looking for a mention of rising water levels, some mention of the future, and the idea that more work will be needed later. When we scan this part of what these people have said, the answer comes quite easily. Paragraph B mentions floods, which could be related to rising water levels, and 20, 30, 40 years are clearly future decades. In paragraph C, for long-term success is mentioned. This may refer to future decades. The paragraph also mentions dams and the coast. So it has something to do with water. But this paragraph is mainly about planting mangroves. The long-term success mentioned here is the long-term success of mangrove restoration, not rising water levels. Paragraph B is better. In paragraph B, we see a mention of rising water levels, seawater breaching the city's walls and coming up through the ground shows that water levels are becoming a problem. Then we see several actions that have already been taken to deal with this problem. The most important sentence is the last sentence, where Yanira Pineda says that in 20, 30, 40 years, they'll need to go back and adjust to the changing environment. This tells us that work has already been done, but more work will be needed in future decades. So this is clearly the statement that matches the question. The answer to question 25 is A. Here are the meanings of each sentence from paragraph B. Pause here if you want to understand them in detail. Question 26. The number of locations requiring action to adapt to flooding has grown in recent years. The question is saying that some places need some work because there is flooding, so that people can adjust to flooding. They can adapt to flooding. And the number of places which have this flooding problem has increased in recent years or in the last 5 to 10 years. As we scan the parts of the passage where different people have said things, in paragraph D, we see some mention of places that did not previously need it. So we focus on this and see what it is saying. It starts with floodwaters rose, so there is flooding, and then it goes on to explain different ways people are adapting to this flooding. This is something we have already read through a little when doing question 20, a gap fill question, which is all about rising floodwaters and what kind of houses are built. This sentence is important. This technology is becoming necessary in places that didn't previously need it. So it doesn't say that the number of places has increased, but it means the same thing. If a technology is now needed in places that did not need it before, that means more places are facing this problem. This part is said by Elizabeth English. So the answer to question 26 is C. Here are the meanings of each sentence from part 1 of paragraph D, and here are the meanings from part 2. Pause here if you want to understand them in detail. Here are the answers of all the matching features questions and their locations in the passage. And this is the step-by-step method we follow when doing matching features questions. We understand all the questions properly. Then we locate all the names in the passage. How many times are they mentioned? Where are they mentioned? In this passage, it was comparatively easier because the names were not repeated in different paragraphs. Each name had one paragraph. Then we focus on the parts where someone has directly said something. Sometimes this is shown through direct quotes. Sometimes the passage simply tells us that someone said or explained something. These are the parts we focus on first because matching features questions are usually about connecting a person to what they have said. After that, we start scanning these parts for the information in the questions. In these questions, for 2 of the questions, we got some help from the gap fill questions we had already done. Question 24 mentions heat. Earlier in the gap fill questions, we had already read about cooling streets and cool pavements. So that made paragraph F easier to identify. Similarly, for question 25, we had already read something about dealing with rising water levels while doing the gap fill questions, and the answer was soon after that. So the information you have already read may help you locate answers more quickly in the next question type. And that brings us to the next set of questions, matching information questions. These questions are the first question type in this passage, but we are doing them last because they are often easier once we are already familiar with the passage. There are many different ways to find the answers in these questions. One of them is to think about information we have already read while doing the other question types. Sometimes an answer may already be familiar because we have seen that part of the passage before. If that doesn't help, we can look at the first sentence of each paragraph because the main idea is often introduced there. We may also check the last sentence if needed. And if we still can't find the answer, we scan the paragraphs for keywords and ideas from the question. So let's start. First, we read and understand each of the questions and identify what kind of information we are looking for. On your screen, you can see the information we look for in each case. We'll discuss it as we do each question. Question 14 is how a type of plant functions as a natural protection for coastlines. So for this one, we are looking for the name of a plant because the question mentions a type of plant, and we have to be careful that when we find that plant, we also find information about how it protects coastal areas. While doing question 19, we read about mangroves, which are a type of plant. While doing that question, we noticed this colon, the punctuation mark after mangroves. A colon often tells us that an explanation, definition, or list is coming next. For question 19, we did not need this information, so we crossed it out. For question 14, however, this is exactly the information that gives us the answer. The type of plant is mangroves, and immediately after the colon, the passage explains how mangroves protect coastal areas. Here's a diagram to help you understand how mangroves help. They trap the sediment or sand in their root systems, elevate or raise the seabed, and dampen the energy of waves or tidal currents. So we have both parts of the question, the type of plant, which is mangroves, and the way it protects coastlines, mentioned in paragraph C. So the answer to question 14 is C. Another way we could have found this answer is by looking at the first sentence of each paragraph. We don't always get the answer from the first sentence, but we often get a clue about the topic of the paragraph. Here, the question mentions a type of plant protecting coastlines. If we read the first sentences, paragraph C immediately stands out because it mentions coastal communities and coastal erosion. None of the other paragraphs seem related to plants or coastlines. Here are the meanings of each sentence from the first part of paragraph C, and here are the meanings from the second part. Pause here if you want to understand them in detail. Question 15. A prediction about how long it could take to stop noticing the effects of climate change. Prediction means we are looking for a statement about the future. How long tells us that we are looking for a time period. It could be days, months, or years. The whole passage is about climate change, so those words alone will probably not help us find the answer. The more useful clues are prediction and the time period. Also, a useful tip. When a question talks about the future, a prediction, or what may happen later, it can be a good idea to check the first and last paragraphs first. This does not always work, but it often helps you narrow down the search quickly. If we look at the first sentences of the paragraphs, paragraph A immediately mentions climate change and its impacts. Since the question is also about the effects of climate change, paragraph A is a good place to check first. When we read paragraph A, we find the answer very quickly. It says, even if we stopped carbon dioxide emissions tomorrow, we would continue to see the effects of carbon dioxide that has already been released. Scientists forecast that global warming would continue for around 40 years. Around 40 years answers the question, how long? Forecast is a synonym of prediction, and effects of climate change in the question corresponds to global warming in the passage. So the answer to question 15 is A. Here are the meanings of each sentence from paragraph A. Pause here if you want to understand it in detail. Question 16. A reference to the fact that a solution is particularly cost effective. Reference means a mention of something. Cost effective means a solution that works well without costing too much money. So we are looking for a solution that is described as cheap or something similar. We may also see some mention of money. From the other questions, we already know that many paragraphs talk about different problems and different solutions. As we scan the passage, paragraph D stands out because we see the word cheaper. This paragraph is about amphibious houses, which we already discussed in detail when doing question 20. Here it says the solution is much cheaper, and there is also some comparison of cost, and this technology is one third of the cost of some other method. So, this is clearly a solution that is being described as cost effective. The answer to question 16 is D. Here are the meanings of each sentence from part 1 of paragraph D, and here are the meanings of the second part. Pause here if you want to understand them in detail. Question 17. A mention of a technology used to locate areas most in need of intervention. We have seen the word intervention before in question 24. Interventions are actions people take to improve a situation or solve a problem. Locate means find. Technology means some tool, system, or method used for a particular purpose. So, we are looking for a technology that is used to find areas that need the most help or action. As we scan the passage, we find a very clear clue in paragraph F. It mentions a geographic information system data mapping tool. A mapping tool is a type of technology. The paragraph says that this tool was used to identify streets with low tree canopy cover. Here is a picture to help you understand the meaning of the word canopy. Canopy is something that covers you like a roof. So, tree canopy are the branches and leaves that cover the ground. The streets with low tree canopy cover are the streets or areas that are most in need of intervention. The answer to question 17 is F. One thing that might confuse you is paragraph D because it contains the word technology. But this technology refers to a type of houses. It is not about finding places which need a lot of help. Another possible confusion could come from paragraph B, which mentions vulnerable neighborhoods, which also means areas where chances of problems are higher. But in this one, there is no mention of any technology used to find out which areas are vulnerable. So the answer is not from paragraph B. Here are the meanings of each sentence from part 1 of paragraph F, and here are the meanings from part 2. Pause here if you want to understand them in detail. Here are the answers to all the matching information questions and the parts of the passage where we found them. And this is the step-by-step process that we followed. First, read all the questions and identify the key information. The first few words of the question usually tell us what we are looking for. For example, if a question says a reference to or a mention of, you simply need to find where that information is mentioned. But if the question starts with how, you need to find the method or explanation, not just a mention of the topic. After that, scan the passage for the key information and possible keywords. One thing I always recommend is doing matching information questions last. By the time you reach them, you have usually read large parts of the passage while solving the other question types. That means you're already familiar with the passage and may even remember where some information was located. In this passage, we saw that several answers became easier because we had already read those parts while doing the gap fill and matching features questions. Before we finish, here is a quick revision. Pause whenever you want to read and understand. This is paragraph A, paragraph B. This is part 1 of paragraph C. Here's part 2, part 1 of paragraph D, part 2 of paragraph D. Here are the meanings of part 1 of paragraph E, part 2 of paragraph E, part 1 of paragraph F, and finally part 2 of paragraph F. Hope this video helped you. See you in the next one. All the very best.